In today's video, we'll discuss 2 trades the Toronto Raptors need to do right now. So without further ado, let's get started. The Toronto Raptors are currently heading towards the bottom tier of the Eastern Conference. And while they aren't terrible, they definitely aren't exceeding or even coming close to expectations. And no one expected them to be title contenders or anything like that, but they're so well constructed and well coached that they were looking like a 5th or 6th seed in the worst case scenario. Their struggles mainly come from injuries, illness, and inconsistency from their key players. The biggest issue with this year's Raptors is their inability to shoot threes and put the ball in the basket in general. They're currently ranked 26th in three-point shooting percentage, which is 12th in the Eastern Conference. To put it simply, they're shooting the ball terribly, and most of the blame has to go on their 2 high-volume shooters, Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby. Fred is shooting 32% from 3 on 8 attempts per game, and he's clearly in a slump because he's a 37% career three-point shooter, but they just aren't falling in at the moment. Recently, after one of his bad shooting performances, he had this to say, quote, "There's a lot going on." VanVleet said when asked if opponents were making a point of running him off the three-point line, quote, "I mean, a lot is going on all across the board. I'm not really going to run down the list with you guys. I'll just play better, and then you'll have better things to talk about. But there's definitely a lot of reasons for the situation I'm in. I'm going to continue to keep working, be professional, and giving everything I've got when I step out there." His answer confused many Raptors fans, especially when he said there's a lot going on. But if we had to guess what he meant by that, he was possibly referring to his knee that he injured last season. Then he injured his hip, which ended his postseason early, and just to top things off, he then had a back problem earlier this year. It's entirely possible he just isn't 100% healed, but he is averaging 36 minutes per night right now, and he's played a majority of scheduled games. Either way, he's not shooting well at all, and his team's percentages are reflecting it. It also doesn't help that OG Anunoby is also in a slump from deep. OG's shooting 33% from 3 on 4.7 attempts per game, and he usually shoots around 37% from 3. Maybe we sort of found out why VanVleet is shooting poorly, but what about Anunoby, who's usually one of the Raptors' main snipers? Well, it turns out Anunoby has also been battling through an injury to his shooting hand. Head coach Nick Nurse revealed the injury news Sunday night in Orlando. Right now, it's unclear when he sustained the injury, but he was seen shaking out his hand in the third quarter in the game against the Los Angeles Lakers after receiving a hard high five from Gary Trent Jr. For their forward, Scotty Barnes, he's shooting worse than both of them, shooting 32.2% from 3 on 3.6 attempts per game. That's not a huge surprise because he only shot 30% last season, but some expected him to take a bigger leap in his game, and that would start with increasing his three-point efficiency. But as of right now, that's not the case. As for Pascal Siakam, he's shooting 31% from deep on 4 attempts per game. And while he isn't expected to be a great shooter, he definitely isn't affecting their percentages in a positive way. But now, for arguably the best shooter on the roster, Gary Trent Jr. Gary is shooting a poor 33.5% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. He's someone who shot over 38% over the last 2 seasons, so to see him shooting this low of a percentage is potentially concerning. But who knows? Maybe the bright side is that Otto Porter Jr. just recently came back from injury, and in his first 8 games back, he's shooting 35% on 2 attempts per game. And we know those aren't great shooting numbers, but he is 40% on three-point shooting, so 35% isn't bad at all for someone just coming off an injury. But now that you know that they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the NBA, let's dive into their struggles scoring. And yes, a lot of it has to do with their lackluster shooting, but they just don't have a reliable, efficient scorer right now. They're ranked 21st in points per game and 27th in field goal percentage. Their best scorer by far is Pascal Siakam, who's averaging 25 points while shooting 48% from the field. But even though he's an all-star caliber, no questioning that, he isn't a reliable number 1 option who can consistently bring games home. In the Eastern Conference, you really need a dominant scorer who can drop 40 in big games. The Celtics have Jason Tatum, the 76ers have Joel Embiid, the Bucks have Giannis, the Cavaliers have Donovan Mitchell, and the Nets have KD, and the list goes on. And this isn't a knock on Siakam, but can you really imagine him in a head-to-head scoring battle with any of those guys? He's good enough to where if he had a good scoring first option, the Raptors' offense could be lethal. Now, this is where we introduce our first trade scenario. And while this trade is unlikely to happen, it's not impossible either. In fact, there's already been trade talks between these 2 teams. The Raptors send Gary Trent Jr., Precious Achiuwa, Delano Banton, and a 2023 first-round pick to the Chicago Bulls for DeMar DeRozan. First, let's talk about why the Raptors would do this in the first place. Like we mentioned earlier, the Raptors don't have a consistent and reliable scorer, and DeRozan is averaging 26 points while shooting 50% on 18 attempts per game. He's also 5th in the NBA in shots within 10 to 14 feet from the rim, while being number 1 in shots within 15 to 19 feet, which means he is currently the best mid-range scorer in the game right now. And sure, he is only shooting 31% from 3, but he doesn't really even shoot threes, and he's only attempting 1 per game. DeRozan and Siakam could do major damage inside the 3 line. But of course, this trade would really be effective if both OG and Fred VanVleet can up their shooting percentages, which would be likely to happen with the attention DeRozan would start getting. And yes, it is obvious bringing DeMar back to Toronto might be a little awkward, given the fact he was traded from there, but let's be honest. DeMar is 33 years old, so he's running out of options that'll give him the best chance to compete for a title, and Chicago isn't it. The Bulls are really missing their point guard Lonzo Ball, and while there are reports of him returning soon, we don't think Ball will be as effective as last season coming off of a knee injury. To be blunt, we don't think the Raptors will be title contenders this year with the addition of DeRozan alone, but they will have a way higher chance than they do currently. And who knows, if Scottie Barnes can take that next step in his career, they may even have a higher chance. But why would the Bulls accept this trade? Because not only is their offense not clicking and are far from consistent, but DeMar is 33, and the Bulls have little to no chance of competing with the top teams in the East this year. So with Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball still being at the start of their primes, they can afford to have an underperforming season or two while still having 2 young stars. 23-year-old Gary Trent Jr., 23-year-old Precious Achiuwa, and 23-year-old Delano Banton are players who can help you win now while also being great for the future. But if that trade seemed too unrealistic and just too unlikely to happen, then our next trade scenario will hopefully be the opposite while still being pretty effective and helpful for the Raptors. The Raptors sent Gary Trent Jr., Malachi Flynn, and a 2023 second-round pick to the San Antonio Spurs for Jakob Poeltl and Doug McDermott. The Raptors could really use an elite defensive center in Poeltl who's averaging 13 points, 10 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and 1 steals and a block while shooting 64% from the field. The 7-foot, 27-year-old would allow Pascal Siakam to stay at power forward. And currently they have Christian Colucco as their starting center, who's averaging 3 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.3 blocks while shooting 44% from the floor. This is not a knock on the rookie though, because he has the potential to be an incredible defender in this league. But Poeltl is a far better and more polished center on both ends of the court right now. He's also a great side help defender, and he's pretty mobile for someone his size. A defense with OG, VanVleet, Siakam, Barnes, and Poeltl would be like playing into a brick wall every night. And as a scorer, he's more of a screen and roll and alley-oop threat. So while he doesn't help their 3-point struggles, he strengthens their defense and gives them more depth. But someone who would definitely help the Raptors' 3-point struggles is 30-year-old Doug McDermott. Doug is shooting 41% from 3 on 4.7 attempts per game. He is one of the best sharpshooters in the NBA, and he shoots 41% from deep for his career. And as of late, he's been on fire, shooting over 46% from 3 in his last 6 games for the Spurs. And while he isn't the best defender by any means, we do think Toronto has more than enough great defenders that can make up for it. So there you have it, the 2 trades the Raptors should do right now. Which trade scenario would best suit the Raptors in your opinion? And feel free to drop your own trade scenarios that could turn their season around in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.